So I was having dinner with a senior policy advisor not too long ago.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and this is someone whose whole career, I mean, his entire professional life is about putting up speed bumps on the path of progress.
Right, the precautionary principle personified.
Exactly. He spent, I'm not kidding, most of the appetizers explaining the moral necessity of this principle. He was talking about global AI alignment, containment protocols, and all in this very hushed, very urgent voice.
He was convinced he was on the right side of history.
Completely convinced. He seemed to genuinely believe that 2025 was going to be the year we finally, tamed the machine.
Yeah.
Brought it all under bureaucratic control.
And then
I showed him a news alert on my phone. A private consortium had just signed a 12.5 gigawatt nuclear pact to power their frontier AI labs.
completely bypassing the public grid.
Completely bypassing the grid he helps regulate. And I just watched his face. The expression, it wasn't just annoyance. It was this flash of genuine, pale-faced realization. He starts muttering about energy sovereignty and unauthorized expansion, and then he drops this line that felt like it was from another century. He said, "They're acting like the laws of physics matter more than the laws of the state."
And that's it. That's the whole story right there.
Was the instantaneous pivot from this smug certainty of a man who thought he held the leash to the raw fear of someone realizing the tide has already come in. It was the most honest thing I saw all year.
That is the perfect encapsulation of the central conflict of our time. It's this collision between exponential technological acceleration and, institutional control.
This massive fracture.
Exactly. You've hit on the core realization. These traditional regulatory frameworks, they were designed for a slower industrial era world, a world where the speed of governance could actually keep pace with infrastructure.
And now they're just being, overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed, circumvent, you name it. They're just not built for the unprecedented demands of frontier technology.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We're looking at licensing documents, export control rules that are literally defining intelligence itself, and then these detailed infrastructure blueprints for transcending our own biological limits. The picture that's emerging it's incredibly clear.
Indeed. And for this deep dive, we're going to examine 3 major interconnected domains where this fracture is most visible, where the traditional powers of the state are really struggling to keep up.
Okay, lay them out for us.
First, we have to look at the energy, the absolutely radical energy sourcing required to power frontier AI. Specifically, this strategic deployment of nuclear capacity to achieve, energy sovereignty.
To bypass the whole system, the thermodynamic divorce.
Precisely. Then we shift from the physical, from hardware and power, to the non-physical realm.
The software.
The geopolitical battle to control computational knowledge itself. And now that's being defined by the smallest, most intangible metric you can imagine, the model weights.
And what's the third piece?
The third piece is the infrastructure that enables our escape from our 2 great limitations, the planet itself, through orbital logistics and the human body, through high bandwidth neurotechnology.
So our goal today is to give you a shortcut to understanding these forces. What specific actions are being taken right now, why the traditional power structures are scrambling, and what it all means for the future beyond 2025. We're diving deep into the technical specs, the regulatory maneuvers.
To see exactly where the laws of physics are winning the war against the laws of the state.
Let's start right where the energy hits the machine. Raw power. I mean, the sheer energy hunger of AI today is it's incredible.
It is.
We are not talking about optimizing consumption here. We are talking about creating entirely new suns on Earth dedicated just to computation.
The scale is absolutely staggering. And you're right, it's fundamentally changed the conversation. It's not about real estate or supply chains anymore. It's about pure energy scarcity.
Right.
The growth curve in these hyperscale data centers is driving electricity demand in the US at rates we haven't seen since the post-war industrial boom.
Decades.
And the utilities, which are used to forecasting this kind of incremental, predictable demand growth, they were quite literally caught flat-footed.
They just didn't see it coming.
They had no planning mechanisms, no capital deployed to handle these immediate 5-10 gigawatt requests that big tech is now just dropping on their desks.
And unlike, say, residential load or even traditional industrial load, this demand is completely unforgiving.
Completely.
When you're training a massive multi-trillion parameter model or you're running a huge inference cluster, you cannot tolerate intermittency. You just can't.
Not for a second.
If the power dips or goes out for even a fraction of a second, you could potentially lose millions of dollars. You could lose days, even weeks of computational progress.
The cost of that unreliable power just exponentially outweighs the cost of the electricity itself.
That's the core economic realization, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what's driving this thermodynamic divorce.
It is. Big tech needs dedicated, reliable, carbon-free energy and the existing wholesale electric markets in the US. They just can't provide it, not reliably, not at the scale that's needed.
And the market isn't set up to reward what they need.
The current market structure fails to properly value nuclear power's high reliability, its zero carbon status. So what's the result? A huge shift to direct procurement. Companies are just bypassing the public grid entirely.
And we're seeing these deals, these pacts. They're huge, like that 12.5 gigawatt pact.
That's among the largest corporate clean power deals ever signed. It just underscores the entire shift.
So if the public grid can't meet this thermodynamic imperative, private capital will just build its own parallel sovereign energy infrastructure. Let's zoom in on the blueprint for this. Let's talk about the Project Matador model.
Yes.
Because this isn't just a white paper. This is a real combined construction and operating license application. It was submitted to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission by a company called Fermi America.
Project Matador, which you'll also see in the licensing documents as the Donald J. Trump Generating Plant Units 1 through 4, is the explicit model for these integrated energy citadels.
Designed for AI.
Designed from the ground up for hyperscale AI. It represents the logical endpoint of energy sovereignty. And the brilliance of the design is really in its hybrid configuration. It's built to serve the unique needs of a data center complex, not a general utility.
Okay, tell us more about that hybrid stack. Why that specific mix of technologies?
So the foundation is 4 AP1000 nuclear units.
And these aren't the small modular reactors, the SMRs we hear about.
No, and that's a critical choice. SMRs are still going through first-of-a-kind engineering, licensing risks. The AP1000 is a large-scale, proven, pressurized water reactor. It has significant operational history around the world.
So going with what works, what's reliable?
They provide the essential backbone. Stable, zero-carbon baseload power with an industry-leading capacity factor. We're talking typically above 92%.
Okay, let's make that tangible for people listening. What does a 92% capacity factor actually mean for reliability compared to, say, a huge solar or wind farm?
It means the facility is available and actively generating power 92% of the time. 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Doesn't matter if it's windy or sunny.
And wind or solar might be.
Wind power, even in the absolute best sites, might average a 40% capacity factor. Utility-scale solar is often closer to 25%.
Wow.
For continuous AI training, that difference is everything. Nuclear is the anchor.
So they chose proven large-scale tech for immediate, reliable, multi-gigawatt scalability.
Precisely. But the system is hybridized, so that nuclear backbone is then augmented with natural gas-fired generation for critical startup and, rapid ramping capabilities.
Solar?
Solar for daytime load displacement, and then large-scale battery storage for instantaneous frequency support and operational smoothing.
So it's a whole ecosystem.
It is, and the application makes the argument explicitly. Without the nuclear backbone providing that stability, the required scale just could not be met carbon-free. They'd be forced to rely exclusively on higher carbon natural gas.
So they frame nuclear as an environmental necessity.
Exactly. It's a very clever way to address regulatory pressure points.
Yep.
Scale, reliability, and carbon footprint.
But the regulatory bypass seems just as crucial as the energy mix. Tell me about the site selection. This is in the Texas Panhandle, right?
The location near Amarillo is a masterclass in jurisdictional maneuvering. It's all about reducing risk through site control. First, they got a 99-year lease from Texas Tech University.
A 99-year lease. Why is that so important?
It's critical. It grants Fermi America sovereign site control and secured water rights. So it effectively bypasses the fragmented and often hostile local zoning challenges, private land ownership constraints that can kill these projects.
A private landowner could protest?
A private landowner could protest for years. A university with a 99-year lease, that's a rock-solid foundation.
It sounds a bit like regulatory arbitrage, using institutional status to speed things up.
You could call it that, or you could call it efficient risk mitigation within the existing legal framework.
Okay. And what's the second piece of that site selection?
The second piece is that it's adjacent to the DOE-operated Pantex plant.
The nuclear weapons facility.
a hardened federal installation that's managed nuclear materials for over 70 years. And this offers profound immediate benefits.
Like what?
Existing federal security buffers, established radiological monitoring infrastructure, regional personnel who are experts in nuclear facility oversight. They're essentially borrowing the security and technical maturity of a pre-existing federal asset.
So they're leveraging federal security infrastructure and the local expertise that's already there to de-risk their own project and just accelerate their timeline.
And that efficiency extends directly to the NRC regulatory process. They're applying for a combined license, but they deliberately delineate between what the NRC regulates and what it doesn't.
Okay, that sounds like a key friction point.
It's the critical bureaucratic maneuver.
So let's talk bureaucracy. What are the regulated versus non-regulated components?
Okay, so the nuclear island, that's the containment structure, the AP1000 safety systems, the spent fuel pool, all of that falls under strict compliance with federal regulations.
10 CFR Part 50 or Part 52.
Right. They're balancing those two approaches. But here's the key. The hyperscale computing structures, the transformers, the solar fields, the battery storage, all the balance of plant, that's all intentionally treated as separate, unregulated components.
And why is that separation so important for speed?
It simplifies compliance and risk containment enormously. You can accelerate the procurement and construction of the data center infrastructure in parallel with the often decade-long nuclear licensing process.
Without compromising safety standards on the nuclear core.
Exactly. It reduces deployment complexity, it reduces the regulatory exposure for the computing side of the house, and it cuts costs dramatically. It's an engineered solution to a regulatory bottleneck.
But hold on. When the initial environmental reports came out, there were concerns. Socioeconomic impacts, historical impacts. This is an area with deep history.
Yeah.
How do they address the environmental impact statement, the EIS, while keeping up this speed?
They're meticulous. They leverage the existing environmental data from the Pantex plant's 70 years of monitoring. For instance, geologically, the site is on stable substrata outside known seismic risk zones.
Okay.
And crucially, on water scarcity, this is an arid region, the Matador design relies heavily on advanced air-cooled condenser systems.
So less water use.
Drastically less water withdrawal and thermal discharge compared to traditional cooling. It mitigates a major environmental policy sticking point right out of the gate.
And what about the cultural cost? The report mentioned numerous archaeological sites.
It did. The environmental reports acknowledged the history. They surveyed the area of potential effect, the APE, and they identified 16 pre-contact archaeological sites. In consultation with the Texas Historical Commission, those sites were ultimately determined to be ineligible for inclusion in the National Register of Historic Places.
Which lets the project proceed without major delays.
Right. They commit to doing more investigations if construction turns something up, but the upfront analysis was designed to minimize cultural cost as a critical path delay.
So they minimize their regulatory footprint by picking a site that's technically a clean slate. It's next to a secure federal site, and they use highly technical, low-impact engineering like air cooling to satisfy environmental policy. This is the definition of physics dictating infrastructure, and the laws of the state just having to catch up.
And the core policy friction is still that this is an unprecedented move to dedicate massive power behind the meter.
Directly to one customer.
Directly to a single limited customer set, the data center, at this gigawatt scale.
Yeah.
Existing nuclear facilities are part of the public grid. They're reliability hubs for millions of people. This new model of sovereign energy capture just completely disrupts that utility structure.
Which brings us back to your opening point.
The economic necessity of frontier AI is forcing private capital to challenge the established laws governing energy distribution and sovereignty.
It's the thermodynamic imperative, creating a regulatory vacuum. The energy demand is pulling computation away from public control. But that computation itself, the intelligence, that's also a primary target for institutional control.
It is.
Which takes us to the next massive fracture point.
Yeah.
The geopolitical battle over knowledge itself.
Exactly. If the first section was about the tangible world of hardware and power, this next part is all about the non-physical essence of intelligence.
Right.
Governments, especially the US government, have realized that just controlling the physical flow of advanced chips, the GPU supply chain, it isn't enough. It's not enough to curb the exponential growth of adversarial AI capabilities around the world.
So the control focus is shifting from the chips to what the chips actually generate, the intellectual property. Let's tackle this new regulatory target, model weights. What are they exactly, and why are they suddenly the target of federal export control?
So when you train an AI model, it's this massive process. You feed it terabytes of data. You use these optimization algorithms to continuously adjust numerical parameters.
Billions of them.
Billions, sometimes trillions of them. Those final adjusted numerical values are the model weights. They are the proprietary hard-won knowledge, the true IP. The basic architecture might be open source, but the trained weights. That represents the massive investment in compute and engineering time.
So the US Bureau of Industry and Security, BIS, is now trying to control the export of this knowledge. But how does the government define a boundary for intelligence that's too powerful to export? I mean, it's intangible. How do they measure it?
They use a proxy, something measurable and verifiable. The BIS Federal Register document clearly states that in conjunction with technical experts, they've determined that a reasonable proxy for a model's performance, and especially its potential for dangerous capabilities, is the amount of compute used to train it.
The number of computational operations.
The number of computational operations performed during training. That's the line in the sand.
Compute is a proxy for power. That is the definition of 21st century digital technocracy. But what does that translate to in terms of hardware control for someone listening?
Well, the regulatory mechanism uses that compute metric to control the physical hardware. BIS amended the Export Administration Regulations, the EE, to expand what's called authorization VEU for validated end user to include data center VEU.
DC, VEU.
And then they split that into two categories, universal VEU or UVEU and national VEU, NVEU.
Okay, that sounds like a real alphabet soup of control. What do these VEU categories actually do?
They create a tiered system of trust for global data center operators. It's a mechanism that strictly restricts the exports, re-exports, or transfers of large amounts of advanced computing integrated circuits.
The GPUs.
The high-end GPUs, based on the destination country group.
So we're creating different tiers of access for who gets the cutting-edge chips needed for frontier training.
Exactly. UVEU status, for example, is very restrictive, but it allows exports for companies headquartered in certain trusted countries as long as their data centers aren't in high-risk zones. NVEU allows a broader range of companies to qualify, but the operational requirements are much tighter.
And the model weights themselves.
The model weights themselves, which fall under a specific classification, ECCN 4E091, are subject to really stringent security requirements if they're developed or even just housed in these DCVEU authorized locations.
ECCN 4E091, that's the bureaucratic code. It's literally translating the intangible essence of knowledge into a legal, export-controlled commodity. This is the state asserting control over the digital means of production.
And the requirements attached to that code are fascinating. The model weights have to be stored on dedicated devices. They need monitored access interfaces. Access has to be strictly rate limited.
So they care less about where the server is physically located.
And more about the digital perimeter and the traceability of who is accessing the knowledge that results from all that compute.
But there's this fascinating regulatory paradox here, the open weight paradox. BIS isn't controlling all model weights, are they? Open source models are currently exempt.
That's the deliberate loophole. And it's a necessary one. Open weight models, the ones that are publicly published, available for anyone to download and use, are currently exempt from these controls, even though the US government is monitoring them very carefully.
Why create that loophole? From a purely precautionary view, the one your dinner companion held, wouldn't controlling everything be safer?
The justification from the Commerce Department is twofold. First, they assess that the most advanced open weight models are, for now, lagging behind the most capable closed proprietary models.
Okay.
And second, more importantly, they determine that the economic and social benefits of allowing open weight models to be published currently outweigh the immediate security risks.
What specific benefits are they prioritizing that would justify this massive allowance for decentralized power?
They see open source development as a critical hedge. The wide availability of these models ensures that a broad range of actors, small research groups, academics, startups, can conduct safety research. They can develop robust defenses against AI risks like sophisticated cyber attacks, and they can pursue specialized commercial applications.
Like customized language translation.
Exactly. Wide availability lets governments and independent researchers rapidly assess risks and develop mitigations. It creates a decentralized defensive ecosystem.
So you're basically using a decentralized open source approach as a parallel safety mechanism. If the big proprietary labs miss a danger, the crowd might find it. And this exemption holds as long as the model was trained on less than 10 to the 26th computational operations. What does that number even mean in real terms?
For anyone listening, 10 to the 26th operations is an absolutely massive number. It's generally understood to be the compute budget required for training the most cutting-edge, general-purpose frontier model.
Like a GPT-4 level model.
A full training run of a GPT-4 or something similar. By setting the threshold there, the US is basically saying, we will allow the diffusion of anything slightly below the absolute frontier, but the technology requiring the maximum compute investment will remain controlled.
And to make sure it's still usable, the rule clarifies that you can do a relatively small amount of fine-tuning on an open-weight model without triggering the controls.
Right.
So this is a geopolitical choice that actively shapes the global landscape. It favors a balance between controlled proprietary systems and a decentralized open source ecosystem.
And this tension between state control, innovation, diffusion, it's playing out globally. It's creating a highly fractured regulatory landscape. We're seeing 4 dominant governance paradigms trying to tackle the exact same problem with wildly different philosophical starting points.
This is where the ideological fracture really becomes apparent. Instead of just reading a list, let's compare these competing visions using a single point of friction. Mandatory security assessments.
Good idea.
How do the 3 major powers, the EU, the US, and China, approach the requirement for a mandatory review before a high-risk AI system can hit the market?
It's a great way to see the divergence. So start with the EU, the rights-based regulator.
Their highest priority is human centricity, data protection.
Right. Their tool is the AI Act, which classifies AI based on risk. For high-risk AI, you have mandatory algorithmic impact assessments, AIAs, and third-party conformity assessments.
Like a digital CE marking on a product.
Exactly. They prioritize pre-market safety over speed. If you want to deploy a high-risk system in the EU, you must prove conformity first, period.
Then you pivot to the US, the innovation accelerator. Speed and technological leadership are the priorities here. So how do they handle mandatory security assessments?
They largely don't. The US approach is guidance first. They rely on voluntary frameworks like the NIST AI risk management framework.
It's decentralized.
Very decentralized. The FTC, the FDA, state agencies, they all chip in, but there's no single mandatory pre-deployment security review for all high-risk foundation models. Risk management is market-driven, voluntary. They rely on existing laws like the Civil Rights Act to police misuse after it happens.
So the US system is build it fast, we'll police the outcomes.
That's a perfect summary. And then you have China, the state-driven strategist. Priority 1 is national security and social stability.
So what does their mandatory assessment look like?
China is highly centralized and interventionist, mainly through the Cyberspace Administration of China, the CK. They issue centralized mandates, like the generative AI service management measures.
And their assessments are mandatory.
Mandatory. They often require pre-deployment security reviews and alignment with broader industrial policy. For a large model, that means demonstrating alignment not just on technical safety, but also on adherence to state policy on content and stability. They sell control and guaranteed alignment before it ever goes live.
And then the 4th pillar is outside government entirely. The ID, technical standard setters, focused on ethical design, transparency.
Right. The IE is driven by consensus and non-binding standards, like their P7000 series. They don't have the power of law, but they set the technical blueprints. Their risk management is all about creating certification-driven standards, like methodologies for algorithmic bias testing. They're selling interoperability and technical rigor as the path to ethical deployment.
So what we're really seeing is this technological arms race, where the EU is trying to sell regulatory standards, the US is selling flexibility and speed, and China is selling state-aligned control, and it's all accelerating global divergence.
The very concept of a shared global governance standard is fracturing under the weight of these competing ideological priorities.
The knowledge itself, the model weights, is now a geopolitical commodity, controlled by a computational budget and subject to 4 wildly different philosophical regimes.
It just underscores that technological capabilities are rapidly becoming the ultimate national assets, driving a new phase of technopolitical competition that really transcends older notions of intellectual property.
And this intense focus on energy capture and computational control isn't just confined to Earth, the final frontier of this acceleration. It takes us off-planet and into the very infrastructure enabling humanity's escape.
Exactly. We need to look at the current advances in orbital capacity and neurotechnology not as these isolated projects in aerospace or medicine. We have to see them as foundational infrastructure.
Infrastructure for what?
For multiplanetary post-biological species, it's about solving the ultimate constraints on human civilization, Earth's gravity well, and the limitations of the human body.
Let's start with breaking gravitational confinement. Starship. You described it as infrastructure, not just a vehicle. What specifically makes it such a paradigm shift in logistics?
It all comes down to cost and scale. Starship is completely rewriting the economics of getting to low Earth orbit. Right. Traditionally, the cost to lift 1 kilogram to LEO was in the thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars. Starship's full reusability and its unprecedented payload capacity are projected to drive that cost down into the low hundreds, maybe even tens of dollars.
100-fold cost reduction.
That 100x reduction changes everything. It turns space access from a rare government mission into a manageable logistics problem.
It means we can move industrial quantities of mass off-world.
Exactly. And the mission architecture for a sustained human presence on Mars. It relies on Starship in ways that go far beyond just transportation. Because of the sheer mass they can carry, the first few years of human habitation on Mars will involve living inside the starships themselves.
So the vehicle becomes the habitat.
The vehicle becomes the temporary home, the temporary asset base, until dedicated habitats can be built. They're designed to be immediate assets on the ground.
That's a radical design philosophy.
It is. And furthermore, that first wave of uncrewed starships will be relocated and repurposed. They become valuable assets for storage, for radiation shielding, and critically, as a source of refined metal and components for on-site manufacturing.
So they're planning for in-situ resource utilization, ISRU, from day one.
And not just using Martian dirt, but using the infrastructure you brought with you as a readily available resource mine.
But to make the Mars mission really work, the Starship ecosystem needs another massive infrastructure breakthrough: orbital refueling.
That is the critical path element. To make the jump to Mars, Starship has to be fully refueled in LEO after its initial ascent.
And that's a huge engineering challenge.
It's a huge challenge. It means solving cryogenic propellant transfer in zero gravity. You have to manage boil-off fluid dynamics, ensure a stable transfer between two massive vehicles. Once that system is robustly established, the entire solar system becomes logistically accessible.
Starship is designed to solve the logistical problems to make us a true multiplanetary species. It's about breaking that ultimate physical constraint: Earth's gravity well.
And while that's happening, we're building a parallel infrastructure to break the most profound boundary of all, the biological one.
Right. Not in orbit, but inside the human skull, through high-bandwidth brain-computer interfaces. Let's talk about Neuralink.
The recent Neuralink human trials, especially with the first patient, Nolan Arbaugh, are the early foundational infrastructure for transcending biological limitations.
Tell us about the procedure.
The procedure involved surgically implanting the Neuralink device directly into his motor cortex. That's the region of the brain controlling voluntary muscle movements. This device has more than 1,000 electrode threads, all microscopic, and they were implanted with submicron precision using a robot.
And what were the actual functional results? This is the technical achievement that validates the whole high-bandwidth approach.
The results were immediate and record-breaking. On his very first day after the operation, Nolan set a world record in BCI cursor control. He achieved a remarkable 4.6 bits per second in cursor speed.
And that improved.
Over the following months, his control dramatically improved. It doubled to 8 bits per second.
Okay, help us translate 8 BPS into something functional. What does that speed actually represent in terms of practical autonomy?
8 bits per second is functionally significant. It's approaching the cursor control speed of an able-bodied person using a normal mouse for everyday tasks.
So it's usable.
Highly usable. To give you another comparison, average typing speeds for able-bodied people are maybe 40 to 60 words per minute. While BCI isn't direct typing yet, 8 BPS represents an efficiency that enables really complex multi-step actions.
So we're talking about profound functional independence purely through thought. Playing complex strategy games like Civilization 6, sending emails, texting, using a phone independently. This is fundamentally rewriting the relationship between the human brain and the digital world.
It is, but pioneering technology always faces biological hurdles.
Correct.
What the public release also revealed was a critical technical issue. Several weeks after surgery, some of the electrode threads had retracted from their optimal positions in the brain tissue.
So the body was pushing back against the hardware.
In a sense, yes. The interface's initial effectiveness was compromised.
How are they dealing with that biological friction?
Well, Neuralink's future roadmap shows a commitment to iterative acceleration. They're focusing on two areas. First, engineering solutions to make the electrode threads themselves more robust and flexible. Second, refining the surgical anchoring techniques to better secure the array within that delicate brain tissue long term.
They're turning the biological response into just another engineering constraint to be solved.
Exactly. And the long-term vision is so much bigger than just treating paralysis.
Right.
The long-term goals extend far beyond treating neurological disorders. They include augmented memory, enhanced cognitive abilities, and eventually direct digital communication through thought alone. The vision is to completely redefine human interaction with technology.
To fully integrate with AI.
Making the human body an optional platform, not a permanent confinement.
What's so fascinating here is the convergence of all these things. Spanning light years of distance and decades of ambition, you've got Project Matador solving the immense energy equation with private nuclear power. You have BIS trying to control the intangible essence of intelligence, the model weights, using compute as a proxy.
And then you have Starship and Neuralink building the physical and biological escape routes from Earth and the human body.
This convergence is what defines the infrastructure of the future.
Unprecedented energy captured by private capital. Geopolitical control defined by computational budgets. Orbital capacity allowing mass off-world logistics. And biological augmentation transcending physical limitations. All these forces are simultaneously defining a future where the laws of physics, the need for energy, the drive for expansion are dictating the terms of engagement.
While the laws of the state struggle to maintain regulatory relevance, so what we've really seen today is not some gradual evolution. It's a rapid, simultaneous acceleration across multiple foundational domains: energy, computation, infrastructure. And they're all actively defying that precautionary principle that my data companion was so desperately clinging to.
Right.
This deep dive has revealed that the political and regulatory structures designed for the old century, they're just being circumvented by economic necessity and technological breakthrough.
To recap that essential fracture, private capital is solving the immense energy demands of frontier AI by commissioning dedicated hybrid nuclear power facilities like Project Matador.
Bypassing the public grid entirely.
Entirely. And at the same time, governments are scrambling to control the non-physical essence of intelligence, using the specific metric of computational operations, the compute budget, to manage the flow of model weights.
Which leads to this fragmented, rapidly evolving global regulatory landscape, all defined by competing national priorities.
And on top of all that, humanity is simultaneously building the infrastructure to escape its physical and biological cages.
Physical with Starship, drastically lowering the cost of breaking us out of the gravity well.
And biological with Neuralink, beginning the process of transcending physical and neurological constraint. We're building the foundational assets for a post-planetary existence.
The policies of the state are trying to catch a thermodynamic tide that's moving at the speed of light.
And the current reality is that every single engineering decision being made today prioritizes the laws of physics over the mandates of governance.
The fracture is massive, the pivot has happened, and that policy advisor, he was right. The laws of physics are currently winning against the laws of the state, and the resulting fracture is where the future will be built.